The Luminous Mind, Episode 18.
If you are not having fun with your educational process, you're doing something wrong.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Shannon Brooks. Shannon Brooks is the founder and president of Monticello College, a small liberal arts New American founder college located on the Colorado Plateau in southeastern Utah. He has over 22 years' experience in teaching and the administration of entrepreneurial higher education organizations. He has taught over 450 face-to-face with greatness seminars in the United States from coast to coast and in Canada, serves as the executive advisor for the Hudson Bay Classical Arts Charter School in New York State, and is a veteran of military service in the United States Naval Submarine Fleet. I'm going to pause here and just say thank you for your service. You bet. He is the founder-president of George Wilkes University and one of 4 founders of the Center of Social Leadership, co-author of a Thomas Jefferson Education for Teens. He holds a bachelor's degree in business administration, a master's degree in education, and a PhD in constitutional law. On a personal note, he loves investing in real estate, hiking, permaculture application, and lives in Monticello, Utah with his wife Julia and their children. Thank you for joining us, Shannon.
My pleasure.
We were laughing, or I was teasing him about it's spelled Monticello, like you would, Thomas Jefferson's home, Monticello. But in Utah, they say it Monticello. So we learned something new.
I've actually researched it. There's about 30 towns in America named spelled that way. About half of them say Monticello, and the other half say Monticello.
Well, and if you look at the spelling, it does make more sense to say it Monticello. So.
Unless you want to sound European, and then it can be Monticello. Right?
Exactly. What a bio. I do have some questions. I want to know how you ended up. Let's see. There's so many things to ask you about. First of all, how did you end up on as an executive advisor for the Hudson Bay Classical Arts Charter School in New York? That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's a great question. I did a number of classes. I did a program called Foundations of Liberty in New York, also in Kentucky and Idaho and Utah and California, rather Colorado, not Idaho. And while I was out there, some of the students that I was working with, and of course these are all non-traditional students, as a result of going through the program, they then decided to have an impact, which is one of the things that we promote, entrepreneurship, and don't just complain about problems in your society, get involved and solve them. And so they did. And they started a charter school out there and then asked me to help support them. So that's what we're doing there.
That is just awesome. So thank you for that. Like I have told my listeners before, I'm a former founder of a charter school, so I understand the difficulties in getting that started. And New York State is probably one of the most difficult states to try to start a charter school in, from what I've heard. Absolutely. And so, yes, I applaud you on that. That's amazing. And then Thomas Jefferson Education for Teens. Is that part of the George Wilkes University? And they do a lot of those types of studies. Is that right? Or
yeah. The Monticello College, of course, is a strong entrepreneurial liberal arts school. And so when Oliver and I wrote that book, that was to take the concept of TJ Ed and apply it to the next generation, those who will be leading the nation during the end of the fourth turning, going into the first turning, and of the century cycle. And so we took the concepts of TJ Ed out of the book and applied them directly to the millennial generation. That was the idea.
Oh, that's neat. And then New American Founder College. What is the focus at your college then? Just the liberal arts, or do you study?
Well, yeah, it's a combination of the liberal arts for sure in a farming application. So the kids raise their own food, they take care of the animals, they do their own butchering, all of that in a framework of the liberal arts, built around the great book series, great books of the Western world, but also strong entrepreneurship. You find more and more kids today graduating from college, huge amounts of debt, a degree in their hand, they can't get a job.
Yeah.
So what do they usually do? They go get more debt, get a master's degree, and they still can't get a job. And so, and that trend is getting worse. And so what we're doing is we're training kids up so when they graduate, they already have an income stream through some entrepreneurial means, whether it's a traditional startup business or network marketing or something that we help them, expose them to a lot of successful people out there, and they work on developing an income stream before they even graduate. So when they graduate, instead of looking for a job, they go out to hire people.
That is awesome. I love that idea. That is so true, because there's so many students that just get out and think that that piece of paper is their ticket to a good life. And in real reality, the reality is that they have to be, they have to have some idea of how to apply those skills that they've learned. So that is amazing. How would a student go about getting enrolled in do you take non-traditional students, and then what would that transcript look like? What do you want to see?
We have a few requirements by law that we have to deal with, and we've been known to fudge on those from time to time if we have an exceptional student. It's just traditionally, you need to have SAT scores, you need to be 18. We can make exceptions to all those rules. I frankly don't put much weight in the SAT or ACT scores. They don't test for what we're looking for. What we're really looking for, and this is why we put so much time in the personal interview process, is we're looking for people who have shown indications. Now, of course, we're talking children, right? We're talking 17, 18-year-olds, but we're looking for these kids who have shown some initiative in being aware of their surroundings, being involved in, trying to impact their communities for good, having the ability to speak well or to engage in music, anything that shows a propensity toward, sustained hard work. They come with all those things already is what we're hoping for, and that they have the ability to, put in a good 30 or 40 hours of study a week. They can come without those, but that's what we look for, because when you get here, that's what you're going to be doing. And so if you already have that skill set in place, it's a lot easier.
Wow. How big is your student body?
At full capacity, it'd be about 120.
Oh, wow. So it's almost like a small high school in that type of realm. Is it a public college or is it a private college?
It's a private college, and it's really built around the model of the 1700s. Until the late 1800s, beginning 1900s, the average college in America had no more than 150 students. It wasn't until we got into the mid-late 20th century that we started changing higher education from the conscience of the nation into, big-time income scenarios where they started building schools that had 10 and 20 and 30,000. We had hundreds and hundreds of schools all the way into the early 1900s in this country that had no more than 100 to 150 students per college. Yeah.
Student loan debt, the government being able to do that has just made college almost, anyone's going anymore if they can do debt. Do you accept student loans, or do you encourage students to find their own way to pay for it?
Yeah, we're one of 3 colleges in the United States that does not take federal funding.
Okay.
If you get a loan, even if you get a signature loan from a bank, because those banks are protected by FDIC, the federal government considers that to be a federal loan. And so there are strings attached. And so since we don't want any strings attached, Grove City, Iowa, Hillsdale College, and ourselves are the only 3 that I know of that will not take any kind of loan. So if you get a loan from a bank, we won't take it.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons, because of that, that's one of the reasons why we are pushing very hard to have a high scholarship program when it's completely in place. It's not yet, but when it's completely in place, our tuition is $10,000 a year. That's room and board. That covers all your classes, room and board. But we will cover $7,000 of it, and the students must cover $3,000.
Oh wow!
We're not to that place yet, but we're getting there. We never want to give it 100% away. We want all students to have to work at some level for their education.
Yeah, they have to be vested in it somehow.
That's right, but we don't want them to have debt at the end, and so we've formulated it so they can participate in paying for it, but not to the point where they go into debt.
That's great. That is great. How long have you guys been operating?
Well, I left George Witt University in 2009, resigned for president then, and then in 2010 we started Monticello College.
Okay, so it's fairly new. 4 years
right.
or so. So, that's
yeah,
great.
In fact, we're still building the campus right now.
Oh, Hopefully your students are helping you with that situation. So that's really neat. I will have to check that out because, I follow Hillsdale, and I just had no idea that Monticello had a college out there. So I applaud you for that. That's great.
Thank you.
So I guess we'll just go back to our regularly scheduled interview. I was just so caught up in all that you're doing that I wanted to ask you about it. So what was your personal educational experience?
Oh, boy. I was on the 7 or 8 year plan for my bachelor's degree.
Oh, that's great. So did you go to a traditional high school then?
I did. I was in Washington State, went to high school, then served a religious mission for my church, went into the military. So I didn't start higher education until I was 28 years old.
Wow. Okay. I wanted to ask you about what it was like living on a submarine too, but I would just imagine cramped. I don't know.
Well, I'll just give you an idea. You have to volunteer for submarine service. They can't pressure into service, and you have to go through a battery of psychological tests. And after serving some time on a submarine, I'm pretty sure the only ones that made it on the boat are the ones who failed the psych eval.
That's interesting. That's funny. So why did you choose to teach alternative to the traditional type education?
Well, I went through several different majors. I attended several different schools before I graduated with my bachelor's. And as I went through these different majors, my first major was psychology. I was so excited. And then I got in the program, and I just realized this is just not the direction I was interested in. Then I went pre-law, and after I did that for a while, I realized, wow, that's just not where I want to go. And I just found that everywhere I went, the quality of education was so poor in terms of really getting a solid handle on that field or education in general, that when we started searching around, when I ran into Oliver DeMille back in 1990, saw what he was doing, that really grabbed my imagination. And the more I got to know him and work with him, he is a taskmaster. You have no idea. And I just realized this is what I wanted. Even though it wasn't accredited, even though it wasn't recognized, it was still way more powerful than anything I've ever done. And over the years now, pushing 25 years, I've interviewed literally thousands of people, traditional college students, their parents, non-traditional students. And what I keep coming back to with these folks who have already gone through college, and they compare their experience to the experience of their children, they universally would say that they feel like they got cheated, that they paid all that time, spent all that money, and literally got very little out of it. And so that's kind of that continuing mantra that I kept hearing from parents and from former or from college graduates convinced me that what we were doing was on the right path, even though it was not really accepted, kind of non-conventional. It really goes back to the roots of what American education is all about.
Yeah, like I said, I'm intrigued to learn more about your small college out there. Well, let's kind of go back. I want to know how you got to know Oliver DeMille and stuff, and how you got associated with him.
Oliver DeMille had served a mission for his church in Spain, and he had returned back to BYU. He's LDS, and so am I, for that matter. Uh-huh. And so he was friends with the daughter of a guy I was working with, an organization called the Institute for Constitutional Education, and they started a youth program and asked Oliver to come and administer it as an internship as a college student. And one thing led to another, and I started working with him through a program called Youth for America. We really didn't like each other when we first met, but we grew to really respect and love each other, and we worked together for 2 decades. He's a very great man and has done some really great things for education, which will change the face long term, ultimately, will change the face of education in America.
Yeah. Well, and isn't he the author, and you're the co-author then, of the Thomas Jefferson Education for Teens? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Do you want to just give our audience kind of a brief summary of that book? Our Commonwealth School actually encouraged our teens to read it last summer, and unfortunately, I couldn't find the book and read it with them. So I'm just curious, kind of just go through it and what you suggest for teens in that book.
Yeah, the basic idea of this particular book is to talk to teens directly and talk about their future, talk about how classics and mentoring, falling in love with learning, right? Scholar faith, how all of those impact them, and why they should care and why they should be involved. And then we do a summary in the end. There's a particular cycle in history called the century cycle, or or the seculum. And it's going on all the time, and the place that we're in it right now puts this millennial generation right in a position of hardship and conflict, which we always get through. We have many times in the past. But how do they do it, with flying colors and become really awesome leaders? Well, there's a lot of information in that book of how others have done it at the same time in the cycle. Say 100, every 100 years you go through the same scenario, and how they can do that, and how studying these classics will really, give them the edge. And so the book is written to them as future leaders of America.
Well, and one of the things I think a lot of teens don't realize, we have just been inundated with a public school system that a lot of people, frankly, take education for granted. They just expect to go to a classroom, just sit in front of the teacher, and somehow the knowledge is going to get there. They think that teacher is responsible to do that. But in so many situations, that is the furthest thing from the truth. And that's what I'm finding with Thomas Jefferson education. I'm fairly new to it. I actually have been doing more virtual schooling and just found it the last couple of years. I didn't realize, though, I kind of have raised my children in that same direction where, they had to take on a self-directed situation around the 4th grade. They kind of start just naturally doing that. And I've really seen from that point on that my children just flourish in the fact that they take that education, that ownership of that education on their own shoulders. And they are the ones, when they feel responsible for it, it magnifies their learning. I don't know how you feel about that, but
Well, it goes back. Education in America from 1607, Jamestown, up until the early part of the 20th century, about 350 years, was based on a very different culture than we have today. One of the primary elements in that culture is called providence. I've asked questions to people, what does providence mean from Alaska to Florida? And I don't get a constant answer. That there is not a universal understanding of providence in America today. But at the time of the founding of the United States, there was. And the definition of providence then had 3 points. 1, there is a supreme being. 2, he knows who you are, and you're his creation. And
you're accountable to him, probably.
You're accountable to him. And thirdly, he has created a very specific role for you to play. We call it a mission or a purpose, a very specific purpose or mission for you to fulfill. Now, if you have a culture that's based on that idea, then you have young people with an expectation of finding their mission, their purpose in life. You also have an expectation of older people probably having already found it and living it and mentoring others in that, and it creates a very different environment. Education then has one role. It is to help you find your mission, prepare for it, and then go do it.
Yes.
That's very different than preparing for employment.
Well,
and what education means today.
And I recently heard we do have a lot of students that have a lot of general knowledge, but there aren't any specialists in anything anymore. And that's what we're really suffering, is that we're suffering teens or students that have a passion and desire towards something, and they just go for it and learn all they can in that and specialize in that, where they become an expert in that. There's just too many kids that have just this overall general knowledge, all things common, quote, quote, and they don't have like a specialty where they have a passion where they can really flourish in an industry.
Yeah. And Mortimer Adler, who was one of the editors of the great books at the University of Chicago in the 50s, his whole point on education was education is not designed to prepare you for entertainment or for business or anything. Education has one purpose, and that is to help you become the greatest human being that you are capable of.
Yeah.
When you have that focus, it's important as employment and providing for a family is, that'll all happen better, and with a better return, the better the human being you are. When we talk about the liberal arts, people say, what do you want the liberal arts for? Well, the liberal arts give you the skills of reading and writing and understanding, able to ask hard questions.
Communication.
All of that. Name me one employment that doesn't require all of those.
Yeah.
And so we kind of have it backwards, where we put all the focus on a skill, which by the time you get into the workforce is obsolete and you have to be retrained anyway. So we ought to just go back to the focus of creating really, really awesome human beings with those skill sets, with the liberal arts skill sets, and they would do much better in business than what's happening today.
Yeah, they would be, like you said, entrepreneurs, not out there just looking for a job.
That's right.
Before we go on, let's take a minute to hear about our sponsors.
Hey fire starters, this is Mark, producer of The Luminous Mind. If you're like me, the thought of going out to the store and shopping is enough to make you want to crawl in a hole and hide. If that's you, then do your shopping online through Amazon. Just go to theluminousmind.net, click on the Amazon link, and shop away. Also, most of the books and resources that Rebecca and her guests discuss can be found on our Amazon links as well. Again, if you're like me, you have already accidentally signed up for Amazon Prime. So most of those purchases should have free shipping as well. Good luck.
Welcome back. What are some successes that you've seen in this application of education?
You know, I back in the day when I was still with George Witt, I did a study for 10 years. I followed 150 of our graduates to see what they would do with life. So these are kids that are 20-something. And by the time the study was over, they were 30-something. It was really interesting. They all had the same degree. It was a bachelor's degree in statesmanship, which is basically liberal arts. And they all had the same exact degree, and it was from an uncredited school. And we found out that those 150 students found their way into almost 30 different fields of employment.
Wow.
Many of them, 15 or 20, went on to law school. Well, you can't go to law school if you come from an unaccredited college. That's just not true. You can, and we showed it over and over and over again. And we had people from this unaccredited school doing anything from hospital administration to corporate America. They were authors, they were teachers, they were farmers, some were in the military. It was just amazing, the range of things, because we had taught them how to think. We had taught them how to make decisions and how to lead out. And those are the skills that every field is looking for.
Yeah. And I would really think that when you're applying for anything, your interview is going to trump any accreditations, because how you communicate, how you can, all that stuff would play into that, don't you think? Or
it has a huge part. I've seen many people going into master's programs or PhD programs that the institution saw they were unaccredited. They, oh, I'm sorry, you don't qualify. And they challenged them and said, you know what, I want you to set an oral exam for me. I want you to do this or that. I challenge you. And everyone that I know of that challenged the system, they were given an exception. They were able to get in. We saw this over and over again with kids going into law school. You come from an unaccredited school. I'm sorry, you're not qualified. Yeah, but look at my LSAT score. Oh, my gosh, you're right. Your LSAT score is so awesome. Okay, we're going to give you an exception. And it's happened over and over and over again.
So it's really just being able to sell yourself to some of those colleges, even though it may not be an accredited school or program.
That's right. Yep.
So what are some habits that you think help make people successful? We talked about hard work. What else would you?
Yeah, absolutely. Hard work, the ability to have vision, and you have to be able to think outside of the current scenario, the ability to have vision, the ability to have persistence. Oh, my goodness, that is such a lost art in our world today. Get an idea in your head, believe in it 100%, show gratitude to the universe for getting it, and then stick to your guns.
Yeah.
So many people have failed. It's the gold rush syndrome, the story of the gold rush where the guy worked it, and he gave up, and then somebody else bought the gold mine, and they dug 3 more feet and hit the mother lode. Don't give up. Have a dream, believe in it, and follow it. That's the key to success right there.
Well, and I'd recently read an article somewhere that said that Chinese and some of the Asian countries aren't better at math. It's just that they don't give up. Americans give up too soon to see the success in especially some of those higher math classes. Anyway.
Yep.
So we kind of talked about Monticello College a little bit. What are some other things that you're doing with them that you're really excited about?
Permaculture is one. I probably should explain that just a little bit.
Yeah, please do.
Sure. Permaculture means permanent agriculture. What we've done is prior to the 20th century, probably the industrial age, I'll say. So for America, starting about the mid-1800s, prior to that, we had a very different way of doing agriculture. Permaculture is the idea that instead of breaking the ground, instead of putting in artificial fertilizer and everything else, instead of having annual plants, that you focus more on how nature does it. You mimic nature. You go with perennials instead of annual. You don't break the ground. You don't plow. And there are so many examples now. If you look this up, you'll find huge places that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars each year in profits who don't trim their trees. There's all kinds of things they don't do. They do what's called key lining, so they can gather all the rainwater and it stays in the ground. And since you have that ground cover on, you don't have the evaporation of the places. There's a whole thing about it. It heals the earth. You're helping the soil grow. When you plow the ground like we do all over the country, there are literally millions of tons of dirt, topsoil, that blows away every year. And when you have sod on top of that soil, that doesn't happen. So anyway, there's a whole science behind it. You can check it out. But our intent is to become a permaculture hot spot in southeastern United States, so that we'll not only be practicing permaculture, but we'll have lots of classes and seminars that our students will then engage in teaching. What we find is there's a place, when you study the liberal arts like we do, and you take this kind of education, there's a thing called the sophomore crisis. And that is when you get it's either in your first or second semester in your sophomore year, you suddenly become totally aware that the world's going to heck in a handbasket, and you got to go out there and save it and fix it. And we always try to tell the students, well, yeah, but you don't know enough yet. Just stay put. And they always come back when they leave. If you give the students outlet, you give them a chance to teach, a chance to share what they're learning, they not only gain more, but others gain tons. And so this is an outlet not only for the students to teach and share, but it's a way for us to really promote the concepts of permaculture. So that's one of the greatest things that I think we're looking at, on top of the regular program that we have going on.
Yeah.
We have aquaponics that we're bringing into play.
Can you explain on that?
Sure. Aquaponics is basically a greenhouse that has a fish tank in it. And so instead of having plants in the ground, you have plants in these platforms that float on water, and that water circulates through the fish tank. The fish have a tendency to pollute that water. That pollution then goes through the fish, through the plants. The plants clean the water. It fertilizes the plants. You end up with tons and tons. A little 20 by 50 greenhouse can feed full-time, 20 families, 30 families.
Oh, wow.
With all the greens, all the fish. I mean, it's a great protein and greens factory. It's almost self-contained.
I'm going to have to check out permaculture, because the thing I hate about gardening is, breaking the soil every spring and trying to replant it. So that's an interesting concept. Thank you. So what are some of your long-term goals? And we talked about a scholarship program, but do you have any others?
Yes, of course. We plan on holding economic and political summits here in town once we have our facilities in place. Long-term, this is the goal from way back with Oliver, the idea of setting up what we call embassies. So we will have actual residencies that we own in places like Shanghai and Sydney and London, where we can have our students engaged in a study abroad programs, where they're actually involved in a lot of what's going on socially in those arenas, and then they send that information real time back to the campus, where we hold simulations based on real time information. It's a great program. We have the advocation program, where we have those who are successful in business or other areas of life actually develop relationships with our students and provide internships and that kind of thing. That's part of getting them ready to have an income stream before they graduate. So, there's lots of things that we're doing that are
and we're becoming such an international society that it's really important to build those networks, that go kind of outside of our own little sphere in the United States. So that seems really neat. So what's some advice or encouragement that you want to give to teachers or parents? This is a very unique idea of teaching. What would your advice be to somebody who wants to go that direction?
The best mentors I've ever had, this is answering your question, the best mentors I've ever had are those who came into class and they said, students, I'm so sorry, I'm not going to cover what's in the curriculum today. I was studying last night. I'm so excited about what I was studying. Let me share with you what I was learning, because I am just super jazzed. It's getting your own education. When a mentor comes in, or a parent or a teacher, and they are on fire about what they're learning, I don't care what they teach. Because what they're going to do is they're going to inculcate into their students a maddening desire to learn and to study. And so who cares what the teacher covered that day? If that gets the students to go home and read voraciously for 5 or 6 hours, they completed their goal.
Yeah, exactly. And just being a good mentor overall in a lot of different areas that you want your children to learn and to grow. So,
But the most important is to set the example.
Yeah.
How do we expect our kids to be excited about education if the parents and the teachers are not excited about education? We hear this so often. You got to study your math. And I've heard kids say, yeah, but you don't like math.
Yeah. That's the worst thing to do as a parent. If you want your children to love math, you've got to love it yourself.
Absolutely. music, anything, science. It applies to all those things apply. And if it's not good enough for you, then why are we forcing our children to do it? So we have to change that mentality. It's do as I do, not as I say. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Is there a favorite book that you have or a resource that you want to share?
Oh, my goodness.
We talked about TG Ed, of course.
Yeah. Go to my website and check out all the books in the 4-year program. It's free there for anyone to look at. It's on our website.
Okay. Which we'll give that information.
MonticelloCollege.org. Yeah.
So what are some ways that you'd want to see the world change in the future? I mean, obviously, you've already taken those steps because you've started this amazing college.
I think I'd like to. I have a mastermind call that I do in the morning, every morning, 5 days a week. And we're focusing on the concept of abundance. I think probably the biggest thing is if we changed it would have the greatest impact in the world is if we could start thinking abundantly instead of from a scarcity mentality. Everything we teach in our culture today is all based on scarcity. And what that means is that there's not enough for everybody. So some people win, some people lose. And you have to have the government come in and divvy it up and so on and so forth. And that's just not true. The more abundant, the less government you have involved, the more abundant people come. It's just amazing how that works. And so I think the idea of really developing a general cultural concept of abundance.
Well, and I think when you have an attitude of abundance, I mean, my own personal experience is that you're more willing to serve people versus like, oh, how can I make money? It's not coming from that. It's more like, how can I be a service to you, and which enriches your life and the people that you touch, their lives as well, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth.
So before we say goodbye, do you have maybe a favorite quote or parting words of advice that you would like to share? And then also give us your contact information, how we can get in touch with you.
Sure. Marianne Williamson has a great quote about, we don't fear our weaknesses, we fear our greatness.
Yes. Sadly.
That's the essence. That's the essence of it. But you got to go look that up. If you're listening to this, go look that up. It's a very powerful quote. Yeah.
And any parting words of advice that maybe you'd give other than that?
Yeah. So. If you are not having fun with your educational process, you're doing something wrong.
Oh, I love that. That's going to be my clip for this call. That is so true. So, yeah. And then how can we get in touch with you and learn more about Monticello College?
Sure. You can go to our website, MonticelloCollege.org, or be reached by email at info@MonticelloCollege.org.
Well, I'm definitely going to go check out Monticello College. Like I said, I had no idea that you were even there. So, and your teaching technique is so just unique that it just sounds so fun and amazing. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. To learn more about us, go to our website, theluminousmind.net. When you're there, click on the Fire tab and be a fire starter yourself. Also, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Google+. Get our audio content by subscribing on iTunes and YouTube. Consider leaving a review to help us grow. Help us light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.